So I'm gonna make this thing from Hobby Lobby. Unicorn kit. It comes with the yarn, the fiberfill, the hook, the needle, and it says you also need scissors, but it also wants you to use stitch markers. So you also need stitch markers. I have these light bulby kind. My yarn doesn't look exactly the same as it did when it came in the box because I already did the head once, but I didn't like the recording was kind of messed up, and I was like, I'll just start over and do it again. So it wants you to work in continuous rounds for the most of the time without joining, which is what the stitch markers are for, to keep track. If you hear any, you know, random animal sounds or yelling, that's just my nonsense brother making noise. So it doesn't want you to crochet too tightly. I think that for tension, especially if you're new, it's kind of difficult, but you want it to be small enough that the fiber doesn't show through the holes. So you do want it to be kind of tight. You can tighten down as you go, which I'll be doing it as I go. But you don't want it to be too tight. It shouldn't be hurting your hands or anything to hold it that tightly. So there's a tension swatch if you want to do that. And that'll give you the measurements and see if your tension is too tight or too small. It has the list of the stitches that you need to know to do it, which are all pretty basic, and the special stitches and such. You might want a notebook and a pen to keep track of your rows. I'm gonna use actually this paper, and I'm gonna mark them as I go, especially if you think you're gonna be having to get up and walk away at any point. It's good to always keep track of where your rows are and what you're on, because it can be kind of difficult to keep track. So this is the yarn that I already ended up using for the head before I took it out this morning. This is the hook that comes with it. It's a 3.5 millimeter. It comes with this needle, which all seems perfectly fine. I have a pair of scissors and the rest of the yarn in the bag there. So the first thing it wants us to do, which I would personally probably start with a magic circle if I were choosing, because I like them better, but it wants us to, with A, which is white, to chain 2, do 6 single crochet in the second chain from the hook. You're not going to be able to see this very well if it's up against white. Okay, so I'm going to make a slip knot, which there's a lot of different ways to do that. I just make one. I'm sure most people know how to do that. Okay, I'm gonna chain 2, so yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, then 6 single crochet in the second chain from the hook. White isn't necessarily the easiest to see, and I don't know how well it's coming through on the camera right now, but I'm gonna insert into the second chain from my hook. So this is the first chain from my hook. This is the loop on my hook, which it's really our first chain that we're working into. So I'm going to do single crochet 1, and then again insert into the same spot, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops for single crochet 2. Now for clarity's sake, I'm going to get a stitch marker and I'm going to put it in the stitch, our starting stitch. So I just this is the second crochet we made, this is the first crochet we made. Sometimes, especially when you're starting out, it can be kind of difficult to tell. So I'm gonna mark that stitch so we know which one is, and that'll help us counting as well. So that's 2, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops for 3, 4, getting all tangled, 5, 6. Now when you do this method, you do end up with a little bit of like a hole, which is why I prefer the magic circle, but that's not what this called for. Oh, and also I find it easier to find the strand of yarn, the end of the yarn that's inside, rather than pulling the one from the outside, because then it wobbles around as it unravels. But if you take some time and, you know, stick your fingers around and find the one that's on the inside, I find that to be a bit easier. So now we will count our stitches to make sure we have enough. So here's the first one, so that's 2, this is 4, and then 5, 6. Our stitches here on the edge. You might have to turn it around a little bit, because what we're doing is we're creating the front of the nose, so we're making a, you know, little circle. So now it says without joining, and I'm gonna place, we have this marker marking our first stitch now. I'm gonna place one, you can do a different color if you like to keep track, but I'm gonna place one here because it says place marker. I'm assuming that's where they want it. And our last stitch of the row. And then it wants us to do 2 single crochet in the next stitch and in each stitch around, which is a pretty standard increase row. So I'm actually gonna mark off round 1. And start the next one. Okay, so like, you know the part where I said that I was gonna do it the way that they said to do it with the chain 2? I was lying. I can't do that. I'm gonna do a magic ring. It looks better. We're just gonna, it's just gonna be fine. So these are a little bit complicated, I guess, to get used to. Obviously I just did the chain 2, so you can do it that way if you want to. There's other ways to do this that might be easier to learn, but just, I don't know, I think this way isn't that difficult. So I'm gonna take the yarn, drape it over my finger, and then bring the tail up and wrap it around like this. Okay, so we got the tail coming over. This is leading to my working yarn. And then I'm gonna take my hook, I'm gonna go under my tail that I'm holding down. I'm gonna catch my working yarn over and bring that up like that. So we just have this loop over. Then I'm gonna pinch my tail and the bottom of this loop with this thumb and finger, and then catch my working yarn over here with these hands, and then go back into my pretty standard stance for holding my yarn, which, you know, everyone has a different one of those, it seems, but this is. So now I need to work into this ring instead of like into the chain 2. And so I'm going to transfer to this hand. I'm still holding the tail and the bottom of the loop, and I'm just going to go under. Now you can, if you want, you can chain 1 to sort of secure this right now like that. I'm not going to, but I'm holding this loop here, just kind of keeping everything in place for now and not letting go of anything. I'm just gonna pull a loop under and through my big loop here. So now I have 2 loops on my hook. Then I'm gonna yarn over and pull through both. Okay, and I'm gonna do that 5 more times for my 6 single crochet. Now I'm going to, like I did before, grab a stitch marker, and I'm gonna mark, this is my first stitch right here. This is the loop on my hook. I'm gonna mark it so that it's easier to see when we come back around. Now the way a magic ring works is that you can tighten it. This is 2, insert into the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through both, that's 3. You can tighten it when you're done your row. So we're gonna do 4, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both. I'm gonna do another, that's 5, right? This is why I have, and this is handy. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now I can take this tail and I can tighten this up pretty far. And now we have a much smaller opening if we have one at all, which is preferable in something like this. So now it doesn't want us to join, it wants us to work continuously in the round. So we're not going to slip stitch to our first stitch or anything like that. It wants us to place a stitch marker. So we're going to place one in our last stitch. My box fell on the ground. That's pretty rude, I think. Get back here. Actually, you know what? Stay down there. You don't need to be up here. Just don't lose my paper. Okay. Anyway. So that's the end of row 1. Doing the magic ring. I think it's better. And you can keep tightening it as you go. Tie it down later. Okay, so now we're going to do 2 single crochet into each stitch around for our increase row. So I'm gonna say, now if I didn't have this marking this stitch, it might be kind of difficult to know which stitch is the one that I want. And if you ever have trouble with that, you can always count back from what you know your last stitch is. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 down in here. But that's why I marked the first one. So I'm gonna insert into there, little wiggle. And then I'm gonna yarn over, pull up a loop. I'm gonna take out my old stitch marker. I'm gonna set that down. And then once I finish the stitch, I'll put it in there. So now this is our first stitch of our new row, in which we are doing 2 single crochet in every stitch around. La-di-dee, la-di-da. Okay, here we go. So into the same stitch, you can look and see which stitch these loops are worked into. I can see it's right, you know, the edge of this one right here. Into the same stitch, second single crochet. Okay. And then to tell, sometimes it can be kind of difficult to tell where your next stitch is, you know, but again, you can shift things around. You can look and see that this stitch has loops around it. So here's our next stitch. We're going to work under that one. We're going to do 1 and then into the same space 2, and after each stitch I'm just kind of tightening down a little, not a lot. Next stitch is right here. 1, and this is where I just sort of tighten it down a little. 2. We're going to do this around all the way into the last stitch. I don't want to tighten it too much, but we do want, like I said, to not have a lot of gapping in between the stitches. 1, 2. Hey, look, there's a little guy. Hi, little guy. Okay, anyway, back to what I was doing. So now we have, hey, get untangled. Nonsense. This is our last stitch, because this is the last stitch of our round. This is the first stitch. So I'm going to leave that in there for right now. You can take it out right away if you want, but it doesn't really make a difference for me. I just work around it. So 1, 2. Now, if you have the first or last stitch, you don't really need to do both, like if you have one marked. So at this point, I think I'll probably switch just to having one, and I'll put it in the last stitch of each round, I guess. Sometimes I do the first stitch. What do we think? Let's tighten that back up. I don't know. In the meantime, let's mark our pattern. So we did this, 2 single crochet each stitch. The next one, when you have these brackets, that means you work what's in the brackets the indicated number of times around. So I'm gonna do single crochet in the next 3 stitches. So 1 single crochet in stitch 1, stitch 2, stitch 3. And then I'm gonna increase in the 4th, which is 2 single crochet in 1 stitch. And then I'm gonna start over and do that whole thing again for a total of 3 times. So we're gonna say that we're just gonna mark our first stitch, because that's how we like to do it. I think that makes sense to me. And I'm literally the one making this. So, all right, so single crochet in the first 3. So we're gonna say insert under our 2 loops here, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both. And now I'm going to take my stitch marker and I'm going to move it over. It's important to remember to keep up with your stitch marker. You can lose track really quickly if you don't have your stitch marker. Okay, so we're doing 3 single crochet. So that's 1, insert under the next, 2, 3, and then an increase in the next. So this one will get 2, 1, 2. At this point, our work will start to curl. It wants to curl inward like this. I think it looks better to curl the other way. So I'm going to keep forcing it, curling it back the other way. So we have 1, 2, 3 increase. So now we're going to start again. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to do another increase. Now, as you're doing these, sometimes it can be kind of hard to tell where you are if you lose track. Obviously, you can go back to the beginning and count, but when it gets bigger, that gets kind of annoying. I don't know if this will help, but I find the easiest way, the stitches where you do the increase, they have a bigger little window. Once you crochet more often, you can just kind of spot it. But like if you go around your work and you sort of pull sideways, you can see here's your little arch of your previous stitch, you know, and then here's your 2 loops working into it. And if you go around and pull, you'll see when you have more loops than just the 2 worked into it, creating the little window. So that can help you to know, if you just need to know, okay, how many stitches was it from my last increase? If you just pull a little gently, just separate a little bit, it'll help you count. So we're on an increase. So 1, 2, and for tension, I'm holding this pretty, you know, pretty normally, pretty kind of loosely, I guess. But like I said, I'm tightening down as I go a little bit. So now we're back to 1, 2, 3, and then here is our last stitch, because this is marking our first stitch of the round, and this will be our last decrease. Get out of the way. 1, 2. So here we are at the end of row 3. Now, round 4, we got another set of brackets. Somebody's working on a lawnmower. Single crochet in the next 2 stitches, do an increase. Single crochet in the next 2 stitches. And we're gonna do this set of brackets 3 times. So this will be a total of 5 stitches worked, because single crochet in 2 stitches, an increase is 1 stitch worked, and then you know, this is a set of 5. We'll end up with more than that because of the increase. But however and wherefore, single crochet in the next 2 stitches, increase single crochet in the next 2 stitches. Lovely. I'm gonna pull up some yarn from my little yarny guy here. Okay, I'm gonna insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops on the hook. I'm gonna move my stitch marker immediately so I don't lose track. Sometimes you can find what row you were on by counting the intervals between your increases. If you were doing increase rows, that can help you if you get in a bind, because if you have 3 stitches in between each increase, then that'll give you some idea of where you were and what you were doing. Anyway, so we're doing 2 single crochet, 1, you know, in each stitch. So 1 single crochet in that stitch, 1 single crochet in this stitch. Then we're doing an increase in the middle of this bracket of stitches. So 2 single crochet in this stitch, in the 3rd stitch. And then a single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches for a total of 5 stitches worked, and then repeat. So, single crochet in the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch. Hey, don't get tangled. 2 single crochet, wait, did I lose a loop? Sometimes you can lose a loop, or, you know, take a loop. No, I'm fine. If so, you just pull your hook out, bring it up, pull your hook out, and then take the stitch out and put your loop back in and redo it. Like if you end up splitting the yarn, or, you know, crocheting your hair into the project like you do. All right, now where was I? See, here's my last increase. So then it was 2. So there's my 2. Now I'm on an increase. 1, 2 for my increase, and then single crochet 1, single crochet 1. Then we start over again. So now single crochet 1, single crochet 1, 2 single crochet in the next for an increase, and then single crochet in each of the next 2. Wow, that was really muddled. Single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. And see, now we got this little nice starting area that doesn't have a hole in it. It's better. It just is better for this anyway, I think. Alrighty, now you can often, and should probably, be checking your stitch counts. If your intervals work out, you're most likely fine. If you end up, you know, your last stitches in the row were the single crochet and then in the next 2 stitches, like your intervals worked, you're probably fine. But, you know, just for funsies, every once in a while we'll count our stitches and make sure we're on the right way. So again, this is marking the 1st stitch in my round, and I'm going to count by 2s because it's easier and faster. So I'm going to bring up my loop. Okay, so we got 2. Now this is the last stitch. We joined 2. We don't count that guy. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, which is exactly what we want to have. How wonderful for us. Okay, rounds 5 through 7, single crochet in each stitch of rounds. Whenever there are instructions for a number of rounds, I say round 5, round 6, round 7, and then I cross them off as I go, because it's pretty easy to lose track, especially if people are going to come up and talk to you, or your phone goes off or whatever. It's so easy to think that you'll remember where you were when you don't. So we're going to just single crochet in each stitch around. This is pretty easy. Hey, don't blow away. I'm just gonna go for this, and probably I'm just gonna move my stitch marker each time, single crochet in each stitch around, and actually I guess I'll just turn this off and come back after the 7th round. I'm gonna mark it off each time to keep track of my rows. So I did row 5 and marked it off. This is an example of what hey, get back here. this is an example of what I was saying when you split your yarn. So in this case, I can just, since I can see it pretty clearly, I can just tuck under. But you also, if you need to, can just slide your hook out, gently pull out the stitch, and then pull this loop up to get past the area where it's split a little bit. And this yarn, specifically, since I already worked this once, is a little more frayed. You can see it's losing a little bit of its. But that's an example of when you split your yarn or catch a little bit that you're not supposed to, and that's how you can deal with that. If you don't, it'll kind of create a tight spot. It's kind of annoying to deal with. I'm gonna finish up, remembering to mark my rows off and move my stitch marker every time.